If you had said the Falkirk Centre to me last month, I would have probably understood that you were talking about the centre of my hometown, albeit a bit oddly phrased. But languages are like that. If you have a decent understanding of one, chances are you'll be able to pull the correct meaning from something, even when it's not said in a way that you're used to. And the way that the brain reacts to different words based on their meaning is pretty cool as well. For example, I've never been to Australia. I've only really watched Australian MasterChef, the best MasterChef, but don't have any particular attachment to Australia. So if you said Sydney to me, my temporal lobe will activate and search around for what I've seen of Sydney, you know, the Opera House or whatever. However, if you say Falkirk, or Falkirk if you're speaking Scots, my brain will activate all over, not just the temporal lobe, and pull all the different memories and emotions I have of growing up there. Whether it's going with my family to Callender Park to watch the fireworks in November, visiting my dad at his office when I was wee with my mum before begging for a McDonald's for lunch, or some other poignant third memory, the centre of Falkirk served as the backdrop for arguably one of the most important moments of my life, campaigning at the Yes stall during the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. Except, that's not what the Falkirk Centre is.
Hi, welcome to another exciting edition of the Falkirk Centre podcast here on the campus of Liberty University, where Christ is King, church is essential, and freedom is everything.
Dear. There's a trend that permeates throughout the right around the world, and it's exemplified by the Falkirk Centre here, and it's that history is malleable, and when they can, they'll brute force their own absurd interpretations of it if people stand aside and let them. It comes across as a scramble for an identity, and one that I think breaks down if it's challenged early enough. There are two examples I want to talk about today. The first is to take a look at the name itself and the reasons for choosing Falkirk, and the second is a look at a term that I see that crops up on all of their social media pages, the term Judeo-Christian. The Falkirk Centre is essentially a think tank based on the campus of Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, and a good way of knowing what a university's values are is to look at the values the centres on campus advocate. So let's take a look to see what the ambassadors of the Falkirk Centre have been saying. We've got birtherism recently in regards to Kamala Harris, promoting anti-masking in the country with the highest number of COVID deaths, advocating for voter suppression during the election, spouting Red Scare nonsense that think Joe Biden of all people is a puppet of Marxists, engaged in election result denialism, claimed Jesus was a white guy, and whatever the hell this means. Of course, this works both ways, allowing us to identify the values of the Falkirk Centre by looking at the university that it belongs to. Liberty is well known for its honour code, which it has every student sign. It details everything from what media they're allowed to consume, what they can wear both in class and casually, and what relationships they're allowed to be in. Quite impressive from a university called Liberty.
And freedom is everything.
So that's an overview of the Falkirk Centre, which was founded in December 2019 by the former president of Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr., who recently resigned but is now suing the university after a number of alleged scandals, and Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA. Some commentators have already got the reason behind the Falkirk Centre's name wrong, instead saying that it's the fall of Falwell and the Kirk of Kirk that makes up the wonderful portmanteau of Falkirk. And thank God for that. It's all just a horrible coincidence, and this right-wing think tank isn't trying to link itself to... These 5 words are enough to make any Scottish person's stomach churn. I audibly laughed when I saw this. Scots aren't allowed to talk about Braveheart in any form without first issuing a disclaimer and submitting a 10,000 word essay detailing all of the historical inaccuracies that riddle the film. You just know the rest of this is going to be full of shit. And you'd be right. As an aside, I could write a whole video on the impact of Braveheart on the representation of Scottish history, as well as the effect the film's had on the Scottish psyche and global perceptions of Scotland, but I'll leave that for another day. For those who haven't seen Braveheart and don't know the historical inaccuracies, here's one for free. Braveheart's Battle of Stirling Bridge doesn't feature a bridge. So the question is, why did they decide to reference the film? Now it might be because the screenwriter of Braveheart received an honorary degree from Liberty University, and that was the only link they had.
And tell our enemies, they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom.
But I think it's something else. I think they could only reference the film, because if they'd referenced the real history of the Battle of Falkirk, they'd find it completely incompatible with their culture war, anti-establishment messaging. But even then, they don't seem to have watched the film, because they immediately say that William Wallace was fighting against the treachery of the Scottish establishment at Falkirk, which wasn't the case. The Battle of Falkirk was fought between Scotland and England, both in reality and during the film. Now, the treachery they might be referring to is the overly dramatic scene revealing Robert the Bruce was one of the knights on the English side, which also didn't happen in real life. By ignoring the real history of the Battle of Falkirk and choosing a work of fiction, they're essentially choosing a blank canvas with which to brute force their horrible views, whilst pretending it's based on some sort of historical principle. And wouldn't you know it? They think they're just like William Wallace and the people in Braveheart, fighting against the the treachery of the establishment. The rest of the section is littered with over-the-top calls to action to join their culture war.
Like Wallace, we must uphold the banner of freedom and advance rather than retreat.
It requires an army of bold ambassadors equipped with biblical and constitutional knowledge to speak truth to believers and unbelievers alike in every professional field and public forum.
The Falkirk Centre will remain on the front lines of this war, and we believe, like the passionate freedom fighters that courageously charged into the breach before us, we will eventually see victory.
The function and the moral mission of the Falkirk Centre is to go on the offence in the name of Christian principles and in the name of exceptional God-given American liberties.
Today we must embolden a new generation of patriots to fight back with resilience.
The only option for them is the siren song of secularism promoted by the far left.
Bemoaning the rise of leftism is no longer enough, although we do, as Jesus taught, turn the other cheek in our personal relationships. We cannot abdicate our responsibilities on the cultural battlefield. Honestly, the quotes here are incredible. Now, you might have noticed there's a lot of reference to Christianity in there, which makes sense because they're a centre that belongs to an evangelical university. However, considering the fact that all of their social media channels state their mission is to renew and defend God-given freedoms in America and restore Judeo-Christian based principles in our national policies, institutions and culture, there's absolutely no reference anywhere to the Judeo part of the Judeo-Christian principles either in the Why Falkirk section or in their purpose and beliefs page. They're just talking about Christianity, which got me interested in what they mean when they say Judeo-Christian values. What are they? When I looked up the term, I found articles talking about Judeo-Christian values being a dog whistle myth peddled by the far right, alongside it being an extremely popular term in Prager University's videos. The internet's gutter. The term Judeo-Christian has been around since the 1930s. James Leffler, Professor of Jewish History at the University of Virginia, states that the term Judeo-Christian tradition is one of 20th century America's greatest inventions, adding that it was nothing more than a marketing ploy to animate American conservatives during the Cold War, and the term's exclusion of Muslims, Native Americans, other non-Western religious communities, atheists and secularists has meant the term has proved an unstable foundation on which a common American identity has been built upon. Its re-emergence in right-wing rhetoric started shortly after a speech by loser of the 2020 American election, Donald Trump, back in October 2017, where he said he was stopping attacks on Judeo-Christian values, shortly before informing everyone, "We're saying Merry Christmas again." Now, I don't know many Jewish people that celebrate Christmas, so I feel like this wasn't really targeted to the Judeo part. And it's not like his very fine people comment describing the Charlottesville Nazis who chanted, "Jews will not replace us!" was doing anything to protect the Jewish community. Comments which co-founder of the Falkirk Centre and former president of Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr., defended to the point where former graduates of the university returned their diplomas in protest. Now, the interesting thing about this is that at the launch of the Falkirk Centre website, the same sections on the Why Falkirk page actually did reference Judeo-Christian values and principles, but they've since been removed sometime between the 27th of February last year and March 29th. And they also removed any reference to Jerry Falwell Jr. after the incidents. During that time, a new wave of conversation surrounding the use of Judeo-Christian discourse was started by historian and lecturer at Harvard Divinity School, Kay Heelan Gaston, in her book Imagining Judeo-Christian America. She looks at the origins of the term and the misgivings about it within the American Jewish community, who started using the term almost reluctantly so to further the case for American intervention in the Second World War. The term has since then evolved though. However, she points out that Jewish leaders like Stephen Wise stopped using the term Judeo-Christian after America joined the war, arguing that for some Jewish Americans the term was a double-edged sword. Even as it brokered inclusion, it had roots in supersessionist ideas of Judaism as this dead root of the flourishing Christian branch. At a discussion at Harvard in January last year, which feels like several decades ago now, Kay Heelan Gaston talks about Ben Shapiro's often inflammatory usage of the term Judeo-Christian. She poses the question that there's lots of people who probably stopped using Judeo-Christian terminology a long time ago, and it's up to them now whether they surrender the usage of the term entirely to the conservative right or try and reclaim it. Mark Silk, who was also part of the discussion at Harvard University and is a professor of religion at Trinity College, had been researching usage of the term for years, writing Notes on the Judeo-Christian Tradition in America 35 years ago. He notes that progressives adopted the term Abrahamic, while the conservative right adopted Judeo-Christian and then warped it to suit their views. A key example Mark Silk brings up is the best-selling manifesto Listen America by Jerry Falwell Sr., in which he suspects that Falwell Sr. uses Judeo-Christian rather than just Christian to appear to be fighting a much wider battle against the idea of a secular society, directly comparable to America's battle against the forces of both fascism and communism. The enemy now was secularism, or secular humanism, embodied in the Equal Rights Amendment, the gay rights movement, legalised abortion, the banning of state-sponsored prayer from the public schools, and so on. Judeo-Christian values became, and remains, the shibboleth of the conservative side of that clash of civilisation we call the culture war. So Jerry Falwell Sr. took a term already reluctantly used by the Jewish community because it appeared only to masquerade as being inclusive, and then redefined it so it propped up his own entirely Christian views, all under the guise that his fight against progressives was a battle for freedom. In order to boost support for his movement, he looked back into history to find something that he could latch onto and manipulate in order to fit and reaffirm his worldview. Like father, like son. So that's two slightly different examples on how the Falkirk Centre misrepresent and misappropriate history, language and culture to create something that reaffirms their beliefs. It looks like the slightest bit of pressure from discussions surrounding right-wing usage of the term Judeo-Christian made them drop the phrase entirely from their website. Now, I reckon it's an oversight that the term still exists in their description on social media, but that's probably because they've got some poor intern churning out their nonsense via Hootsuite. The only good thing is that the facade of pretending they stand for Judeo-Christian values has kind of fallen. The Falkirk Centre also didn't have the capacity to do any research to find something historical to match up with their name. They've instead had to warp the history of Falkirk so much that they had to resort to a film riddled with inaccuracies in order to patch together some sort of Frankenstein monster that represents their shitty views. I don't expect the Falkirk Centre to drop the name. They've clearly spent a lot of money on their branding, but at least they'll know that people are looking at them and know that they're full of it. So for now, Christ might be king, church might be essential, but doom is eternal. Thanks for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and if you really liked it and want to support me, then you can visit my Patreon and get included in the credits and access to all the behind the scenes stuff as well. I'd like to say a special thanks to Soft Neon Glow and Megan G for taking a look at the script, and another special thanks to patrons Suzanne Brown, Dylan Aitken, Fitz Amasov, Jeanette Patterson, Lego 2x4, Talesian, and Mastergun117. Thanks very much, folks, and I'll see you in the next one.